Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Academy of Animated Art Live. My name is Mike Tanzillo, and I'm going to be talking about Nuke today. So this is a request that came in earlier this week where somebody said, and I think the quote was literally, "I don't know what the hell I'm doing in Nuke. Can you show me something?" And I said, sure, because I was exactly in that position myself when I was first getting started in Nuke. I want to give you guys a function. So anybody who has never, ever opened this program before, by the end of this 30 minutes, you will be able to open it, be able to process images, and be able to go through the process. Will you be an expert? Absolutely not. I've been working with this software for 11 years. Am I an expert? Absolutely not. I am fully functional, and I've created thousands of images. I've gotten compositing credits on multiple films, all that good stuff. But it's a robust software. And as you know from anything else that we teach at the Academy of Animated Art, it's not about the software. It's about you, the artist, becoming a better artist. But that being said, I kind of wanted to demystify this whole idea of what Nuke is. So the biggest thing for me when I was first starting was just never working with a node-based software before ever, and kind of being taken aback by it and having no idea what I was doing with it. I remember the teacher, I took a class, a compositing class, and I remember the teacher just kind of like assumed that we all knew what we were talking about, and it was Shake at the time. And he just like jumped right in and just started grabbing all these noodles and nodes and talking about, pulling green screen, but, pulling keys. I was at a level 0. I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And it took me a long time to finally get the full concepts of it. And I was like, man, if you would have just like given me a half-hour rundown at the beginning, I could have been so much in a better position to learn all that other stuff. So that's what this is. So this is essentially the 30-minute demo that I never got, that I really, really wish that I had. And it's something that we cover in our compositing course. But like I said, I got that email and it just resonated so much to me. How the hell do I use Nuke? And I wanted to help out with that. So if at the end of this, like I said, throw up your questions. If you're in Zoom, throw up your questions in Zoom. If you're on Facebook, post them in the comments there. And I will take a look at the end of this and answer any questions that you may have. But I kind of want to get into it a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then just make sure. Let me just do a quick tech check before I start doing that, just because, and this part is always the part I edit out of the video on YouTube. And here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen and go live. Or I'm going to share my screen, I should say. So here's Nuke, right? It is actually, let me hide my window here, my video, so you guys can see it. Okay, so we've got Nuke here. Totally intimidating to look at right out of the gate, right? It's like there's all these values, there's all these numbers, there's all this just stuff everywhere. Now I want to break it down into 4 main quadrants, or yeah, we'll do 4 main quadrants. The first one is this area. So this is just our window. This is just us doing stuff to an image and seeing it, right? Photoshop has this, all the other softwares have this area. So it's this black box, and all this is our viewer section. So this is just seeing what we're doing. There's a couple really cool things about this viewer that I like. We've got, if you notice, like look right down here, as I'm pivoting around, you can see the RGB values, you can see the alpha value, you can see the HSV and the luminance and the aspect ratio and all that good stuff. So lots of good information there. We'll get into, I'll get more into that in a minute, but just so you know, this is the viewer window. Down here, this is our workspace. So this is, we're bringing something in and we're right, like this is where we work. This is where we lay out our nodes. That's all you need to know for right now. Over here to the right, this is the space, this is like our attribute editor if you're familiar with Maya or Cinema 4D or any of the other softwares. This is where we modify the attributes within each node. So like this is a color grade node. So this color grade node has all of this, has all these different things we can do. We can make this double the value. We can make it 5 times the value in super bright. And you can see, we can see this changing here in the screen. And as I hover over this, you can see my pixel values are now 5 times higher than they were right here. So that's the viewer window. We've got our node tree down here. And then we have this whole right block. Everything to the right of this thing that I'm moving back and forth is our attribute editor. That's how we're going to make the adjustments that we need to make. Over here to the left, we have all of our nodes that we can select from. So everything from all the color corrections that we can do, all the keys that we can pull, all the transforms that we can make, everything that we do, it's just the tools that we use to move, to change the image. So that's it. That's the big starter pack, right? We've got this viewer window up here, attributes to the right, our workspace down here, tools to the left. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, this is the thing that I really wanted someone to show me early on. Let's just zoom in, just isolate these two. So we've got these two nodes right out of the gate. What is this? This is, well, first off, this is our axolotl character from our asset library, who was recently and brilliantly, I might say, named Sir Axolot. So I'm very excited about it. So this is meet Sir Axolot here. And what this is the most basic Nuke tree that you will ever see. Right here, these guys. So what this is Nuke reading in an image. So you've rendered an image, you've got it sitting in your file directory. This node right here is called a read node. And I'll show you how to make it in a second. But this is our read node, and it brings in that image. It then, you can see out here, this is our little noodle. So this is anything that happens after this node. So we start here, we've got this, and now let's say all I want to do is write it out. I just want to bring it in and write it out to something else. You just plug these together, right? These noodles essentially are like plumbing. Think of it as like plumbing. So you start here, this flows into this pipe and it spits out here, it does this thing, and then it flows down. That is the basics of a Nuke tree. You bring something in and then you write it out. Now, where true compositing comes in is right here in the middle, where everything else happens, right? So this is where you do color corrections. This is where you layer images together. That's all that stuff is coming. But just know at its base value, Nuke reads something in, does stuff to it, and then writes it out. Now, how do you get this stuff in? Let's go ahead and delete this. Let's create this from scratch. Now, there are multiple ways to create a new node. As I mentioned earlier, we've got this tool menu over here. So at the very top, you'll see image. Now this is just image processing stuff. So like I said, the very first one, you want to make a read node. And what this does is it pops up a dialog box, and it allows you to navigate to your image, and you just want to bring that in. That's it. That's your read node. Now, you can see that nothing popped up over here, right? That's because you need to tell Nuke what to look at, what to put in here. And you just do that with the numbers. So right now I'm hitting the number 1. And you can see this 1 shoots out over here, and it creates this viewer node. So this viewer node is just telling it what to put in this window. So like if I created a grade node and I turned it up to 5, you can see now this 1 is coming out of here. But if I just grab this and put it here, I can change this to 5 million, and it doesn't matter because you're not looking at it. It only is when you switch it down to here that, whoa, it gets super bright. Okay, sidetrack there. But we got the read node, and then we can also create the write node under it. Now what the write node does is this just tells it where to go. So similarly, I would do this, and like I'd want to put it in my final images folder, and I would say final test dot. And then if I just said it, if it was TIFF, you can see it automatically updates to all the TIFF stuff. If I change this to a JPEG, it would change it to the JPEG controls. It's a pretty smart little node there. That's pretty much, that's one way of creating those nodes. Another one is it's so common in Nuke that they've automatically assigned hotkeys to it. So I can hit R, and create a read node, and W to create a write node. Or the third way, and this is a very common one too that I like to work with a lot, is you hit the tab key and it brings up this dialog box and you can just start typing in. So this is if you already know what kind of node that you want. And I'm like, I want a read node. Just type that in. Here comes the read. Let's say I want this one. And then you can create a write node from there. Same. All the same nodes, all the same everything. Now, we talked about stuff happening here in the middle. Like I said, you can create a grade node, which is a very common color correct node. Make adjustments to this. You can say, let's double the value. Now let's say that you're like, okay, cool. Now I don't want to change the whole image. I just want to change like the left side of the image. Now you'll probably hear this term a lot. You've heard the term maybe rotoscoping or rotoing in compositing. It's like a big scary term that's just saying that you want to draw a shape and isolate something to that shape. Now I'm going to create a roto node. How do I do that? There's the different ways you can create it. You can create a roto node here or a roto paint node, or you can go roto. And you can also see too, if I'm creating those, like these letters, those are the hotkeys to it. So I can just go over here and hit P, and we've got a roto paint node. Now, if I want to draw this, and let's say I only want to affect this region of the image, right? But like, how do I do that? I've got this super bright, but I only want it to be on the left-hand side of it. Check it out. We've got this noodle off to the side that when we pull it out, it says mask. So mask or alpha, well, mask is the term, right? Because you're just basically saying, I want to only create this inside of that. And so now, oh, weird. Oh, my aspect ratio is wrong. Huh. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Sorry, this is a strange image format and not normally what Nuke likes to see. So now you can see we've got this shape, and now you're saying, do this only inside of this shape. So I like to think of nodes as like a sentence. So it's like, take this image, do this, and spit it out here. But if this is plugged in, then you only do this operation inside of what I tell you to here. And like I said, you can draw a roto, or you can do something where you pull in what's called an alpha channel. Now, an alpha channel is something that was not explained well to me when I was first starting. So if you go up in this image and you hit A, so we've got this little boy. I'm going to take this off. So what you're seeing is a black and white image. So what we're talking about when we talk about an alpha channel is this black and white image that's embedded into most of the visual images that you work with. Because you'll see RGBA, right? Any image that's an RGBA that you render out is going to include a red channel, a green channel, blue channel, and an alpha channel. So in this example, oh weird, why is that displaying as the alpha? Huh. Weird. There we go. Whew. Okay, so now you can see this. This is the alpha channel of this boy. And the reason why that's important is because this is a built-in channel that's saying this boy lives inside of this boundary. So he's only available and only exists in the areas of the image that are white, not in the area of the images that are black. So let's say if we made a checkerboard here, and we wanted to put this boy over top of this checkerboard, but like we need the image to know that this is only inside of this area. So what it is, and this is a merge node, this is something else that you'll be using often, and the default is an over operator. So you're saying, and again, like the sentence structure, take this image, put it over top this image. Now, how do you know that this is going to cut this out? Again, it's just in the alpha channel. So you're saying only do this inside of the alpha channel. Now, how do you know that the checkerboard isn't going to be put over top of the boy like this, and we're not going to see it? It's because you see these A's and B's. So think of it as a sentence. A always happens before B. So take this boy, put him over the checkerboard, and done. So that's a basic merge operation. And I'll take you through a more complex comp here in just a second where you can see some variety of these merge operations. So that's cool and everything, but let's say I want to make an adjustment. I want to make the boy's eyes much brighter, but I don't want to go in there and draw like an articulate shape. There are ways of rendering out things. And again, this isn't a highly detailed look into cryptomats or anything, but just so you're aware that this is something that's commonly done in compositing. So I can pull out a cryptomat. Most renderers, Arnold, V-Ray, Redshift, all use this version of a cryptomats in them, and they spit them out to Nuke. And you can use a cryptomat node to pull this, and you can just select the area of the cryptomat that you want. And in this case, I'm just grabbing just the eyes. And now you can see that although this image looks like this, in the alpha channel, when I hit A, it's just the eyes. So now if I wanted to take this and say, I want to make this image like 5 times brighter, but I only want to do it in the eyes. What I'm doing is I'm branching this off to the side because this is going to loop around. And you can have as many, like I can have as many things coming out of one node as I want. And then you could bring them all back together in the end. Like I can edge detect something or erode something and blah, 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 blah. And all this stuff can happen off to the side here. And then you can bring them back together. So in this case, let's delete these to avoid confusion. So I've got this, but because it's reading this alpha channel, it's doing it to everything. But I say, no, 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 I want it to read this alpha channel. So what do? You plug this in here. And now you can say, this is only making the eyes brighter. Right? And same thing too, if I like brought in this snail, or the axolotl, can't believe I called him a snail. Ugh. If I brought him in, you can see we've got this alpha channel being brought in here, and now we're only seeing it where the axolotl is. So this is basically saying, another way of thinking this is saying, don't use the alpha from here, use the alpha from whatever I'm plugging in here. So whether it's a shape that I draw or a shape from another image. That's that. So the main things that you're going to do when you're working with a CG composite of a CG scene is you're going to be color correcting and image manipulating, and you're going to be layering. So I guess 3 things. Depends on how you want to look at color correction and like things like blurs. If you want to look at those as 2 different ones for one. So let's see. So this is the final image that I made of the axolotl. And this is the comp. And normally like when people show you composites, they're like these big, gnarly, nasty things. And people are like, yeah, and they'll put them in their demo reel and they'll like do all these pans and zooms and everything. And I'm never really that impressed with that stuff because it's so easy to make a complex composite But the best compositors I've ever worked with had the simplest comps to read and simplest ones to understand. And they're very, very straightforward, and they make every node work. Because the more you, and this is true of anything, the more you process an image, the more broken down it's going to get. So this is also a good time for me to mention one of the reasons why I love Nuke so much. And that's because it is a non-destructive way of working. What do I mean by that? So if you work in Photoshop, if you've ever worked in Photoshop before, you will make changes to your image and you will manipulate something. And then you save out the file, you close Photoshop, and then maybe you send it to a client. A week later, the client's like, ooh, we need this instead of that. Instead of this modification you made, we need to do that other thing. Now, if you open that file back up, unless you save things in layers, unless you were like really, really conscious about it, that alteration that they're asking you to make might be completely lost in the history. You might have to completely restart from scratch. Nuke doesn't work that way. It's because things flow down this pipe and they process that way when you're working. And therefore, you don't have to worry about what any changes. Because like whenever you open it, my source image is still there. The modifications I make are still there in the order that I told them to. And at any point, I can turn something off. I can change their order around. I can do whatever I need to do. Nothing is ever broken. The history is never lost. You never ever have to worry about how many Control Zs you've got because the history is always, always, always there. And like, if you just want to like turn something off, but you don't want to delete it forever, it's great because you can just hit the D key and just disable a correction. It's great for checking, and it's great for your workflow. Because lots of times I'll be like, I don't know if I like that. I'm just going to turn that off real quick. So, and like I'll show an art director, be like, do you like this or do you like this? Something like that. So let me go ahead and take you through this comp very quickly to give you a rundown of what a pretty, like this is a pretty simple comp. Nothing too crazy going on here. But just to show you the main things that you would do with a comp, which would be bringing in images, writing them out, making color corrections, and merging different images together. So this image is made up of two images. We've got the Sir Axolot before, and then we've got the background image. In this example, I was using, what did I remember this in? Arnold, and I was just goofing around with Arnold's in-camera depth of field. So lots of times I'll do depth of field in Nuke, but in this particular case, I went ahead and did it in the composite. So let me take you through kind of like a step-by-step of what I did. So the first thing that I did was, so I knew this was a still frame. I knew I wanted it to be big and pretty. So I went ahead and rendered this larger than I would ever need it. So 3840 by 2161 or 2160, extra pixel, I don't know where that came from. But what I want to do is I want to output this at 1920 by 1080. So what I'm doing with all of my images, and this is a common practice that I have when I bring them in, I reformat them down to my final resolution size. And that's because I don't want to layer a really big image over a really little image because things can break that way. So I just reformat it down to my final output size. Let's show you guys here. So the eyes in this were a little bit deadened, and I'll go back to this in just a second, I promise. So what I did was I added a little bit of eye-ding action here. I'll show you guys how I do that in just a second. But the biggest thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to take this original image, merge it over top of this background, do some color corrections to it, and spit out the final results. So let's take a look. And again, we kind of talked about this already, but in its most basic form, we've got this image, we've got these two images, and I'm trying to bring them together because this is normally how I start working. Like I'll be like, okay, let's bring these together. Let's merge them together. A over B, okay? And this is what I was talking about, not putting reformat nodes in there. Okay, now they're looking okay. By the way, if you need to set your resolution at any point, you just hit the S key and it brings up, you guys probably saw me do this earlier. This brings up the project settings and you can change the resolution of your final image in there. Okay, so bring this in over top of this. Then what I do is I just kind of back these guys up, like way up here and way over here to give myself some breathing room because I know I'm going to make some changes in between here and here. And then I start going from there. So that's where I'm at here and here. Now, what I showed in the merge operation was the default. That's the over node. Now, there are other things you can do. You can change this operation around. This is like similar to if you guys, and again, I keep going back to Photoshop because it's so popular and so common. There are like, these are all the different layering methods. And again, these are all based on math. So if I just like hover over this, you can see all of the different operations and what the math is on them. If there's mathematicians out there, you are more than welcome. Because sometimes these actually help me. Like the one I'm going to, just pay attention to the plus, because we'll do that next. So if you over an image, what it does is it's taking, like I said, it's the math is tough to get on it, but it's basically taking the A image and putting it on top of the B image. If you think of like thin acetate, the way that they like cell animation, you just put one over the other. Now plus, on the other hand, if you go back to look at this, plus is adding the values together. So it's not like cutting out the alpha and layer them together. If I change this to plus, what's happening is it's taking the value of this. So if you look at those RGB values down below here, it's taking that 0.5, 0.19, 0.21, and it's adding to these values. And the result looks like they're blended together. It's because their values were plus together. And you're like, why would anybody ever want to do that? Well, what about this? Got to reformat. I want to put these little eye dings in there. We talk about eye dings all the time. Very important to character lighting. Now, I could have gone into the 3D scene and created some like circles and placed them around, or some lights and these would be the reflections of those lights or something. And I could have worked really hard and I could have gotten it totally accurate in 3D, or I could have just drawn these little dots. And let's say I took this little dot, I transformed it, I kind of stretched out. We can take a look at it here. So this is before and after the transformation. I can plus these two together, so now we got two dots. And I can glow them up a little bit. And then I can, because like again, this is what I built, and I just want to take these white values and pop them over the top there. I don't necessarily want to layer them on top. I want to add them to the image. I want to take these white things and I want to plus them in, because everything, the nice thing about this is that everything else in this image is black. It's like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 across the board. So when you plus it together, it keeps that original image the same. So plussing is just a way of adding in some additional value. Now we go over here and we've got this image. And what I did was, like, when I was looking at this the first time, I was like, man, that's dull. It's pretty lame and pretty flat. So I went in and I goosed the saturation a little bit more, especially in the greens. I gave the greens a little bit more of a go. And then I went ahead and I pushed the value a little bit by this exposure node. And I went ahead and I drew a roto because I wanted it to be a little bit more towards the middle. And then I blurred that up so you can kind of see because these exist in the alpha channel. Just because I wanted a little bit of feathering around these edges. So it's not, because we can really focus in on the center here. And then I took this image in the back, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to blur this a little bit more. I'm going to push that depth of field just a little bit more, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image, and because if I just layer this over top of the original, we're going to lose something that happens photographically, which is like a little bit of blurring that happens along the edges. So what I did was I created a light wrap, and a light wrap grabs the alpha from this original one, and it just like pulls off the edges, based on the amount of space that I give it. And then, like, if I crank this up, you can kind of see it. And it kind of grabs the edges of this original one, and it puts what's back here around the edges. And now you can see that it's a little bit, it gives it a little bit more, And now when I layer this back over the top, it's got a little, like you can see a little bit of these values creeping in. Let me crank that back down to 1. You can see it's given just a little bit of that value in the original axolotl. So it's like the blur is coming together, especially in depth of field, right? Because it's all kind of getting blurry and mushed. And then once I got this pushed together, I realized after I layered them over that my axolotl was still looking a little dim. So I went ahead and goosed him up a little bit there. So now we've got them layered over. And I wanted to just add like an overall, like a kind of a glowy happiness to the scene. So I just added a little glow node. And then I realized that I was kind of losing the viewer, the eye around the edges. So I created this vignette. Because again, I wanted to zero everything in on the middle. The way I created this vignette, again, I drew a roto. I blurred it. And like I said earlier, what you're doing is you're saying, only do the color correction thing in the white area, not in the black area. So if I did that here, you would see it would darken inside this circle and leave the edges brighter. So what I did instead was I inverted it, and now we got that there. And you can see here at the bottom, this is a little variation on the right node, is you can see I created 2 write nodes to write out 2 different files. Because I wanted to create like a JPEG I could throw on the internet and for our marketing purposes and on the website and everything. And I also wanted to create a full res TIFF just for myself, a 16-bit TIFF, just to always have like a higher res image. So yeah, so I think that gets us in about a half hour. And that's basically the start of your Nuke knowledge. And that's something I wanted to just kind of demystify that a little bit. Because again, all a Nuke, and because this boils down to the same thing. We've got these images, we're just reading them in, we're doing crap to them, putting them back together and spitting them out the bottom. That's it. That is what Nuke is. And like I said, it's a totally powerful tool. It is extraordinarily things that you can create with it. And it's extraordinary the things that you can create with it very, very simply. So let me go ahead and share my video, stop sharing my screen. And then if you guys have any questions about anything, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So like I said, we are often asked about, as a lighting artist, I was just asked this one. So like, as a lighting artist, it's like, how do you work with a compositor, right? Like, how is that an interaction that you guys have? And the way I always say it is like, because they were like, well, how do you handle depth of field with your compositor? How do you handle this with your compositor? How do you handle that? And I always tell people this: at the end of the day, nobody cares who did what to the image to make the final image, right? Nobody cares if the lighter did something or the compositor did something. You need to work together with that other person to make the best image possible, because that's all that matters. So what you need to do is you need to establish a working relationship between the lighter and compositor in order to pass off certain assets and be like, oh, I need to add this ID. Compositor, can you throw that in? Sure. If not, I'll do it. Sure. Cool. But the bigger thing that you guys need to know, and I kind of switch these orders around in my head, but the bigger thing that you need to know is to why this is important if you want to do lighting is because lighters are often the compositors on their shots, especially in animation. Like in, I know like Disney and Pixar and at Blue Sky, we're moving towards a system where the lighter is the compositor and you are one and the same. And I know that, like I said, even when they were different groups, the lighter is still the person who sets up the comp and creates the entire Nuke tree and then passes that off to a compositor. That's a very common workflow in animation. So even if you're not even though you're not the final compositor on the shot, you're still creating the Nuke tree and setting everything up. So it is extremely important to know this knowledge for your job. More importantly than that, it's extremely important that you know this stuff so you can make a polished image, because that's what we're doing at the end of the day. We're making the best images possible. And there are things that you can do better in Nuke than you can ever do in the renderer. Not necessarily like it ultimately looks better, because you can do pretty much anything in the renderer. It just takes you less time. Like I could figure out a way, like I said, those idings, right? Like creating little idings. Just by chance, I happen to have some pretty good ones from this lamp I have next to me. You can create some good idings by going into going into Maya, and then, like I said, you take a circle and you put it up over here where this light is, and you make it super bright, and you make it just the right shape in my eye. But if I'm animated and I go like this, then I go like this, you're like, no, and I gotta move it, and I gotta animate it, and then I have to re-render the whole thing, and it takes so much time. But Nuke, I can just take a little thing and like pin it to your eye and move it around or do whatever you need to do in Nuke, which is so much faster than waiting for a render. So like that axolotl, I have a weak MacBook here, and that thing, probably took, I don't know, that one wasn't too bad, maybe 15 minutes to render that frame. But if I have to re-render a 500 frame shot, which is not that long, which is 17 seconds or so, that'll take me days, weeks, right? If I don't render farm. But instead, I can make those adjustments in Nuke on the fly and see the results in seconds. So that's the power of it. It's not always how fast you can do it. It's not always like the technically best way. Sometimes it's like you need to move on to the next project and you need to get stuff done. So that's my rundown on Nuke. Like I said, if you all have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, post them in the comments of this section, and we'll go from there. So coming up on this week's in the COVID adjusted Academy of Animated Art going live, we are going to be interviewing Francesco Giraldini. He is a lighting TD at DreamWorks, and he will be joining us and answering all of your questions. So make sure you guys come with some questions then, and he will just give a little walkthrough and everything. So keep going, keep letting us know. Like I said, show us what you got in Nuke, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So hope to hear from you soon. All right. Happy lighting, everybody.